He was already dressed when she came to the bedroom door. Binta had been ready for an hour. Not because she was eager, because she had learned, over 3 years, that being ready early was one of the few things in that apartment that never caused trouble. Cha Min-suk adjusted his cuff in the mirror and did not turn around.
Stay home tonight. You would be uncomfortable.
She stood in the doorway and did not move. Say the real reason. He looked at her then, not with cruelty. That was the part she would think about afterwards, on the days when she allowed herself to think about it at all. There was no cruelty in his face. There was only a man being practical about an inconvenience. You disappear in rooms, he said. It is not your fault. Some people fill a room and some people do not. I need to be seen tonight. Beside you, I am not. Who are you taking? Yeo Soo-jin. She runs the Hampyeong Gallery. People know her face. He said it the way a man reads out a delivery time. Then he picked up his keys, and he touched her shoulder on his way past, which was somehow worse than if he had not, and he left. The door clicked shut. Binta Diallo stood alone in a very quiet apartment and did not cry, and did not follow him, and did not reach for her phone to plead with him the way she had the first year and the second year. She went to the drawer beside the bed and took out a plain black leather folder that had been sitting there, untouched, for 11 days. Inside it was a summons, not to her, from her. Subscribe to Seoul and Seoul Stories, where love outlasts every empire built to destroy it. Stay close for this one, because the man who just walked out of that apartment had spent 4 years begging a stranger for something, and he had been sleeping beside that stranger the entire time. To understand what was in that folder, you have to go back 23 years, to a war nobody outside a very small number of rooms has ever heard about. In the winter of 2003, 4 organizations in Seoul spent 9 months tearing each other apart over a port contract. It ended the way those things end, badly, expensively, with people gone who should not have been gone, and with every family involved weaker than it had been at the start. What came after was stranger than the war. The 4 heads met, and instead of dividing the port, they built something. They agreed there would be a seat. One person holding no territory, taking no percentage, belonging to no family, who would hear disputes and rule on them, and whose rulings all 4 would accept. The problem was finding someone every one of them could accept, because every Korean of any standing in that city was already somebody's cousin, somebody's creditor, or somebody's enemy. So they chose a man who was none of those things. Amadou Diallo had come to Busan from Mopti, in Mali, 20 years before, and had built a small, boring, extremely honest freight brokerage. He spoke Korean carefully and slowly, and had never in his life been in a room where anyone raised their voice. 2 of those 4 families had gone to him over a cargo dispute years earlier, because he was the only person either of them would let touch the manifest, and he had settled it in an afternoon in a way that left both sides annoyed and neither side cheated. They came to him in the spring. He said no. They came back in the summer. He said no again. He said yes in the autumn, and only after he had written down his own conditions and made all 4 heads sign them, which nobody had expected and which was, in the end, the reason it worked. There were 3 conditions, and they have not changed in 23 years. The first is that the seat is never seen. Rulings are written and delivered by one carrier, and the carrier is the only person alive who knows the face. No meetings, no photographs, no name. The second is that the seat takes nothing. No gift, no share, no favor, no dinner. The seat lives on a fixed monthly stipend paid in equal parts by every family at the table, and if a family stops paying, that family loses its access, and nothing else happens to it. The third is that the seat may not rule on its own household. Amadou Diallo held that seat for 19 years. He raised a daughter in a small apartment in Yeongdongpo on a stipend that would have embarrassed most of the men who paid it. She grew up watching her father read files at a kitchen table and put them in a locked case and say nothing about them, ever, to anyone, including her. When she was 24, she asked him why he had said yes. He told her that a room full of dangerous men had asked him to be the one thing none of them could be, and that he had realized something, somewhere between the summer and the autumn. Being nobodies, is not the same as being nothing. He had a stroke 4 years ago. The families were told he was unwell and that a ruling would be delayed by a week. The delay was not because he was ill. The delay was because it took his daughter 6 days to say yes. Binta Diallo was 31 years old the night her husband told her she disappeared in rooms. She had held the quiet seat for 4 of those years. In that time, she had ruled on 140 disputes between men who would have killed each other over most of them, and not one of those men had ever seen her face. She had been very good at it. Better, some of the older ones said quietly, than her father, though they would never have said that to him. And the entire practice of it, the whole daily discipline of the work, was this: be unremarkable. Wear nothing anyone remembers. Take the bus. Sit at the back. Do not be interesting at the shops. Do not be photographed at a wedding. Be, in every room you enter, a woman nobody could describe afterwards. Her husband had spent 3 years insulting her for being extremely good at her job. She met Cha Min-suk before any of it touched him. He was 33, and he ran a small logistics firm out of 2 rooms in Incheon, and he was nobody, and that was precisely what she had wanted. He asked her what she did, and she said administration for a freight company, which was true in the way that the sky is blue, in the way that the sky is anything. He was warm then. He had a way of asking a question and then actually waiting for the answer, which she had not encountered often. He told her once, early, that he liked that she was quiet, because it meant that when she did say something, it was worth stopping for. She married him 14 months later. Her father was still alive then, and he came to the ceremony and shook Min-suk's hand and said very little, and afterwards he asked her only one question, which was whether this man wanted her or wanted a wife. She said she did not know yet. He said that was an honest answer and left it there. Min-suk's firm grew. It grew the ordinary way, through work, and then it grew a different way, through proximity, and by the 2nd year of the marriage he was moving cargo for people whose names did not appear on any manifest. He was careful. He was good at it. And he began, the way men in that position always begin, to want a chair at a table he could see from where he stood. You have to petition the quiet seat for that. Everyone does. 3 pages, submitted through your sponsoring family, heard once a year. She petitioned the first time in the spring of the year they were married. Binta read that petition at a kitchen table 2 meters from where he was sleeping. She denied it. Not because it was his. Because it was thin, and because the sponsoring family had a history she did not like, and because a first petition is almost always denied and everybody in that world knows it. He came home the day the ruling landed, and he was quiet all evening, and she made him the soup he liked, and she sat across from him and asked him what had happened, and he told her, and she listened, and she said the thing you say. She did that 3 times over 3 years. The second denial he took badly. The third denial he did not take at all. That was the year he changed. Not into a monster. Into something more ordinary and more corrosive than that. He became a man with a grievance, and a grievance needs a face, and because the quiet seat has no face, he built one. He decided the arbiter was an old man. He said so at his own dinner table, more than once, with his wife 2 feet away, with a serving spoon in her hand. He said the old man was protecting his friends. He said the old man had been sitting up there since before half of them were born, and had lost any idea what the work actually took. And on one particular night in February, with a spoon in his hand, and his wife 2 feet away, he said it plainly. The old man is protecting his friends. He has never built anything. Binta Diallo put a bowl of soup in front of her husband, and said nothing at all. People ask why she did not tell him. There are 2 answers, and only one of them is comfortable. The comfortable answer is the first condition. The seat is never seen. She had signed her name under her father's 3 conditions in a room with 4 men in it, and a person who breaks that on the first night it becomes inconvenient was never fit to hold it. The uncomfortable answer is the other one. She wanted, once in her life, to be wanted as Binta, not as the seat, not as the ruling. She had spent 4 years being the most important person in rooms she was not allowed to enter, and she wanted one man, one, who had chosen her when she was nothing but a quiet woman with a boring job and a good laugh. She got that man for about 11 months. Then he got successful, and he started looking around a room to see who was in it, and the last place his eyes ever landed was on his wife. 11 days before the banquet, the folder arrived. It came through Han Jae-oh, as everything did. Jae-oh was 34, and he was the carrier, which meant that he was the only living person who knew that the quiet seat was a woman from Mali who took the number 6 bus. His father had carried for her father. He had been carrying for her since the week she took the seat, and in 4 years he had never once used what he knew, and never once asked her a question that was not about the work. What was in the folder was a problem. 2 families, the Namgung and the Wu, were 8 days from something that was going to look very much like the winter of 2003. It was over a bonded warehouse, and it had been building for a year, and the quiet seat had already ruled on it twice on paper, and the Wu had refused the second ruling. Refusal is permitted once. What follows a refusal is that the ruling is delivered again, in person, at the table, in front of every family, and accepted or the refusing family leaves the table permanently. In person. It had happened 4 times in 23 years. Her father had done it twice, both times in a side room with the doors closed, in front of 4 men. This one would be at the autumn banquet, in front of 200. She read that folder 11 times over 11 days, and every time she got to the same wall. The docket for that evening had 6 matters on it. The Namgung and the Wu were the first. The 6th was a petition for admission to the table, 4th submission, submitted through the Guang family on behalf of a logistics operator in Incheon named Cha Min-suk, her husband. The 3rd condition, the seat may not rule on its own household. She could not recuse herself because there is nobody to recuse to. The seat is one person. She could not delay it because a refusal has a clock on it, and the clock had 8 days left. She could not hear 5 matters and leave the 6th, because leaving it would tell every man in that room that she had a reason. There was exactly one way for Binta Diallo to sit down at that table and do the job her father had built. She had to not be his wife. She went to a lawyer on the Tuesday, not one of theirs. A tired woman in a small office in Mapo who had never heard of any of these people, which was the point. She filed on the Wednesday. I want to be careful here, because there is a version of this where the papers are revenge, and that is not what happened, and it matters. She filed the dissolution 8 days before her husband told her she disappeared in rooms. Before the mirror, before Yeo Soo-jin. Before any of it. She filed it while he was still, as far as she knew, a difficult man she was still married to, and she filed it because the work required it and for no other reason. She sat in her car outside that office in Mapo afterwards for 40 minutes and did not start the engine. She told me later that she kept waiting to feel released, and what she felt instead was the specific grief of a woman who has just done something correct and would have given a great deal to have been allowed to do something foolish instead. The papers sat in a drawer for 8 days. And then, on the 9th day, her husband stood in front of a mirror and told her she would be uncomfortable at a party, and handed her, without knowing it, the only mercy available in the whole business, which was the ability to stop wondering. If you are still here, stay with me, because everything from here happens in one room over about 40 minutes, and there is a moment in it that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I first heard this story. Jae-oh collected her at 7. He had brought a garment box. He set it on the table and did not open it and said, without any particular hope, that there was a dress in it if she wanted one, and that he would understand either way. She asked him what he thought. He said she had spent 4 years making sure nobody in that room could describe her, and that a dress they would remember would hand them a story about a woman who had been hiding. They cannot describe you. That is not hiding. That is the work. She wore what she wore, a dark gray wool dress she had owned for 6 years. Flat shoes, because the venue had a stone floor and she intended to be standing for some of it. Her hair in the same low twist. No jewelry except her mother's small gold hoops, and the plain steel ring her father had worn for 19 years, which is the only object the quiet seat has ever been permitted to keep. She looked, walking into the Danam Hall that night, like somebody's accountant. That was the entire idea. The banquet was already full when she came in through the service corridor with Jae-oh half a step behind her. 200 people. Dark silk on the walls, gold light, round tables, a low steady noise of men being pleasant to men they were negotiating with. Cha Min-suk was at a table near the middle, which he had been irritated about all week. Yeo Soo-jin sat beside him in dark red, being looked at, which was what she had been brought for and which she was aware of, because she was not a stupid woman. Binta stood at the edge of the room for perhaps 90 seconds, unnoticed by anybody except a waiter who asked her whether she was looking for the kitchen. And then her husband saw her. What happened next took about 11 seconds, and Cha Min-suk will be paying for it for the rest of his life. He did not think. That is the truest thing I can tell you about it. He saw his wife standing at the edge of the most important room he had ever been allowed into, wearing a gray dress he had seen 100 times, and he felt the specific hot panic of a man who believes he is about to be embarrassed. And he stood up, and he crossed 6 meters of carpet, and he took her arm. "What are you doing here?" He did not lower his voice. He had gone past the point where a man remembers to lower his voice. "You cannot be here. Do you understand what this is? Go home." Heads turned. Not many. Enough. Yeo Soo-jin turned in her chair and looked at the woman in the gray dress and then at the man holding her arm. And something in her face began, very quietly, to reorganize. Binta looked down at his hand on her arm. "Let go of me, Min-suk." He did not, immediately. And that was when Han Jae-oh stepped forward. Jae-oh did not touch him. He put himself in the space beside them, which is a different thing, and he said one sentence, not loudly, in the flat administrative tone of a man reading out a room number. "Take your hand off the seat. There is no sound in the world, like 200 people stopping at once." It did not travel outward from them the way things do in films. It came from the front. The 4 oldest men in that hall were at the head table, and they had heard the word seat, and they were already getting to their feet, before most of the room had understood there was anything to understand. Namgung Tae-ho was 71 years old and had been paying into that stipend since he was 48, and he stood up so fast he knocked his water over. And once those 4 were standing, the room went up like a field catching. Not all of it. Enough. Table by table, in a wave that took maybe 20 seconds to cross the hall, 200 people rose to their feet for a woman in a 6-year-old gray dress, whom not one of them could have picked out of a queue at a bus stop an hour earlier. Cha Min-suk's hand was still on her arm. He let go of it the way you let go of something hot. Binta did not look at him. She has been asked about that a great deal since, whether she looked at him in that moment, and she says the same thing every time, which is that she did not, and that it was not restraint or strategy, and that the honest reason was that she had 6 matters on a docket, and 8 days on a clock, and there was no room in her head that night for her marriage. She walked to the front of the hall. There is no throne. That is worth saying, because people imagine one. There is a plain chair at a plain table, set slightly apart, and it is put out at every banquet, and it has been empty at every banquet for 23 years, and most of the younger men in that room had assumed it was decorative. She sat down in it. Jae-oh set the case on the table and opened it and stepped back. And Binta Diallo spoke, in a voice that a lot of people in that room afterwards described as disappointingly ordinary. "Good evening. There are 6 matters. They will take about 40 minutes. Then she asked the Namgung and the Wu to come forward. She ruled on the warehouse in 9 minutes. I am not going to pretend it was thrilling. It was not. It was a woman reading dates out of a file and asking 2 very frightened men short questions about tonnage. The Wu had refused her second ruling because it had given them the lease and not the freight, and they had believed that was a punishment. She explained that it was not a punishment. She explained that the freight had been moving under a Namgung bond since 2019, and that if she had given the Wu the freight, the bond would have collapsed, and the Wu would have been holding a warehouse they could not legally load for 2 years. She said she had thought that was obvious in the written ruling, and that on rereading it she accepted that it had not been. I said that badly in writing. That failure is mine, not yours. Then she gave the same ruling again, unchanged. Wu Jin-tae, who had come to that hall fully prepared to leave the table and go to war, stood there for a long moment with his jaw working. Then he accepted it. He accepted it, several people have said since, mostly because of the part where she said the failure was hers. Nobody in that room had heard anyone say that in 23 years, and it did more work than any amount of authority would have. Matters 2 through 5 took 19 minutes, and then she said the 6th. The room, which had settled during the tonnage, came back all at once, because by then every single person in it knew. Petition for admission, 4th submission, she said. Guang family, on behalf of Cha Min-suk. She looked up for the first time since she had sat down. Before I hear it, the room should know that I filed for the dissolution of my marriage to the petitioner on the 5th of this month, 8 days before this evening, and that the filing is with the Seoul Family Court and can be checked by anybody who wishes to. I did that because the third condition does not allow me to rule on my own household. It is not a comment on the petitioner. It is the condition. You could hear the air handling. Mr. Cha, come forward. He came forward. There was nothing else available to him. And here is the part I keep coming back to. Cha Min-suk had spent 3 years telling anyone who would sit still for it that he had been denied 3 times by an old man who was protecting his friends. He had said it to his own wife across his own table. It was, by the end, the organizing fact of his life. He believed it completely. Binta opened the file. You have been denied 3 times, she said. You were given a reason each time. I am going to read the reason, because I do not think it was passed to you. And then she read it, and it was the same sentence 3 years running, in slightly different words. In 2023, and in 2024, and in 2025, the petition of Cha Min-suk had been denied because he had taken a percentage on 2 consignments from a party he was carrying for as a neutral and had not declared it, and the table does not admit a man who takes from both sides of a load. 11.4 million won, in 2022, before she had ever read a petition with his name on it, before they were married. It was not a large amount of money. That was almost the worst of it. You were not denied because of a woman, she said. You were not denied because someone was protecting a friend. You were denied for 11 million won. You took in 2022, and you were told so 3 times. And I think your sponsor did not pass it on to you, because it is not a comfortable thing to hand a man. She closed the file. The petition is denied. He did not say anything. There was a very long moment in which 200 people watched a man understand that the grievance he had built his entire personality out of had never existed, and that the wife he had been ashamed of had been the only person in Seoul who had actually read his file. And then Binta Diallo did the thing that her father would have done, and that nobody in that room expected, and that is the reason I am telling you this story at all. She said, "It is a 4-year bar, and you are in year 3. Declare it. Repay it to the Wu with interest at the statutory rate, in writing, through your sponsor. Do that and submit again in autumn, and I will hear it properly. And you should know that I will not be the one hearing it, because I will recuse under the 3rd condition for as long as the connection is recent. It will go to the deputy. That is to your advantage, Mr. Cha, not to your cost." She looked at him for what several people have described as about 2 seconds. "Go and sit down." He went and sat down. Yeo Soo-jin was not at the table when he got there. She had left during the tonnage, which is to say, she had worked it out about 25 minutes before the room did, and she had not made a scene about it, and she had not written anything on a card. She had simply stood up, walked out, and got into a taxi, and the following morning she sent Cha Min-suk a single message which he has never shown to anybody, and which she has described only as short. She has been asked about that evening in the years since, because she is a public enough person that people ask. She says one thing about it, and she says it without any particular heat. She says she was invited to that banquet as a face, and that she went knowing she was being invited as a face, and that she had made her peace with that, and that what she had not agreed to was standing next to a man while he shouted at a woman who was better than both of them. He found Binta afterwards on the stone terrace behind the hall, because of course he did. She was standing at the rail with the city going on below her, doing the thing she had wanted to do for 11 days, which was breathe. "You could have told me." She turned around. "No," she said, "I could not, and you are not really asking that." "Then what am I asking?" "You are asking whether it would have been different if you had known." She let that sit. "Yes, it would have been. That is the whole problem, Min-suk. You would have been kind to me on Tuesday because of what I was on Monday. I did not want that. I have had that my whole adult life from men much more powerful than you, and it is the loneliest thing in the world." He said her name. "I wanted to be married to someone who thought I was worth the trouble when I was nobody," she said. "I had that. I had it for about a year, and I have thought about that year a great deal, and I want you to know that it was real. and that I am not going to pretend it was not just because of how it ended. Binta, you called me invisible. I know. I was invisible, she said. On purpose. For 19 years I watched my father be invisible on purpose. And then I did it for 4, and it is the hardest thing I have ever done, and you thought it was a personality defect. She picked up her case from the rail. I am not angry with you. I was, for about a week. I would like you to declare the 11 million and repay it, and I would like that to be because it is the correct thing and not because it gets you a chair. Good night. And she went back inside because she had a room to leave properly, and because a woman who walks out of the front of a hall is making a point, and she had spent 23 years of family discipline learning not to make points. Jo drove her home. They did not talk for most of it. At a set of lights near the river, he said, without turning his head, that she had been right about the dress. She said she knew. Then, after another kilometer, without turning his head, he told her something he did not have to tell her, because he did not want to have a thought about her that she did not know about. I wanted to break his arm. It has passed. I will not raise it again. She looked at the side of his face for a while. Then she said thank you, and they drove the rest of the way in a silence that was, for the first time in 4 years, slightly the wrong shape. He did not speak about it for 11 months. That is not a figure of speech. 11 months, through 2 dockets and a very difficult spring, in which he arrived on time and handed her files and told her nothing about himself, because he had decided, without discussing it with anybody, that a woman who had just come out of 3 years of being managed by a man was not going to be managed by him either, and that the only honest thing available to him was to be exactly what he had always been, until she said otherwise. She said otherwise on a Thursday in September, at a kitchen table, over a file about a dry dock in Ulsan. She said she had eventually worked out that his silence was not indifference. Then she closed the file and looked at him. You have not asked me a personal question in 11 months. How long will you keep it up? He said, as long as she needed. She said that was the correct answer, and also that he had answered a different question than the one she had asked. They were married the following June, in the garden of the house in Yeongdongpo where her father had read files for 19 years, in front of 9 people. She wore ivory that she chose herself, on a morning that belonged to nobody but the 2 of them. She kept the seat. Of course she kept the seat. Jo stepped back from carrying, because a carrier cannot be a husband, and his cousin took the case, and the first condition held, because it always holds. 200 people saw her face once, on one night, for 40 minutes, and every one of them still refers to her in a room as the seat, and not one of them has ever said her name outside of one. That is not fear. I want to be precise about that, because it is easy to assume it is fear. It is that they watched a woman tell a hall full of powerful men that a mistake in a ruling had been her failure and not theirs, and something in the room decided that night that whatever she was, it was worth protecting. Cha Min-suk declared the 11.4 million won in the January. He repaid it with interest, through his sponsor, in writing. He submitted again the following autumn, and it went to the deputy, exactly as she had said it would, and he was admitted, narrowly, on the 5th submission. He is at the table now. He does not talk about the arbiter anymore. He was asked about that night once, at a dinner, by somebody who did not know better, and he said only that he had been married for 3 years to the most impressive person he had ever met and had spent the entire time complaining that she did not fill a room. Then he said that filling a room is a thing you do because you need something from the people in it, and that he had not understood until he was standing on a terrace being spoken to very kindly by a woman he had lost, that the people who do not need anything from a room are the only ones who ever get to sit down in it. There is somebody in your life right now who you have decided is quiet. Maybe at your work, maybe across your own table. You have decided that because they do not compete for the air, and because they let you talk, and because they have never once made you feel that you had to earn their attention. I would like you to consider, tonight, that you might be doing what he did. That being easy to overlook is not the same as being small, and that the person you are not looking at may have already read your file.